It's you, the Canadian taxpayer. I go to Ottawa for you.
His style is to make sure that he is front and center and getting attention, and he uses his persona to do that.
I love a lot of the things that Kevin wants to argue. Today I would endorse Kevin O'Leary, absolutely.
Two former Dragons with two very different opinions of Kevin O'Leary. O'Leary finally made his leadership candidacy official after a lengthy and well-publicized courtship with the federal Conservatives. It's not the first time Dickinson has opined on O'Leary. About a year ago, she called him the Donald Trump of Canada. She's backed away from that recently, in a way. O'Leary himself says it's baloney, but it's becoming clear the comparison has stuck and he'll have to deal with it in the months ahead. We're dealing with the issue now on round two of the Sunday Scrum. Susan Riley, John Ibbotson in Ottawa, and Marty Patriquin joins us from Montreal. Let's begin by listening to a little bit more of Arlene Dickinson on the O'Leary-Trump comparison.
The bravado, the lack of awareness of other people's circumstances, the desire to have it all be about himself. These are things that the narcissism, for lack of a better word. I think there is a lot of similarities between these two individuals. What's different is the countries in which they're trying to exert themselves in. Our circumstance in Canada is completely different than the circumstance in the U.S. And so whether it will play here is yet to be seen, but I believe Canadians are much smarter and looking for something far different than what this type of individual might be as a leader.
I wondered if Arlene Dickinson was going to run for some political party in the future. What did you make of that? Susan, let me start with you this time.
Well, first of all, I agree with her completely, and I thought it was a really interesting insight. This is somebody who worked closely with Kevin O'Leary for 7 years. She said she's not interested in running for either of the parties. In the past, she's supported Stephen Harper, and she's also supported Justin Trudeau on various things. So she's kind of comported herself like a journalist, in other words, a nonpartisan. Who knows? I don't think she was motivated by a sense of political advantage. I think she was motivated by a need to warn Canadians about what this guy's really like. How he resembles Trump, he's not a carbon copy of Trump, but how he resembles Trump strikingly is this incredible arrogance. She called it bravado. Incredible arrogance, this notion, and he almost used these words, that I am going to come to Canada from Boston, where he spends a lot of his time, and I'm going to save the country. I'm going to save the country from ruin. It echoed that apocalyptic speech, the inaugural address that Trump gave the other day. I think that dark and distorted, though Trump's vision was, and O'Leary's analysis is, that message does resonate with certain people. And what happens to O'Leary next depends on how many people it resonates with.
Marty, what do you think?
I disagree. I think Arlene is right in the sense that he's got a mouth, he's got an ego, and he's got a ready-made narrative, and he's good at saying he's richer than he actually is. That's where the comparison ends, though. Look at what he said before. He is not protectionist by any stretch of the imagination in anything he's ever said. The other thing too, and I think this is an important thing to mention. Not to say that by the way, it's not to say that he doesn't have any baggage a la Trump. I know for a fact that the Oppo file is about that thick on him for Kevin O'Leary in the coming months. But his position specifically on immigration, he came out steadfastly against what Mr. Trump said about Mexicans and about Muslims, and he did so to his great credit. Yep. Just about the Arlene Dickinson thing running. Yeah. I have heard from a source that the Liberals are grooming her for a seat in Alberta.
Ah, really? Okay, well, that's interesting. John, what do you make of her comments and the fact that will Kevin O'Leary have to shake this comparison to Donald Trump?
He can't shake it. You have a narcissistic entrepreneur who becomes the head of a reality television program and then runs for the leadership of a Conservative party. You have a narcissistic entrepreneur who becomes the head host of a television program and then runs for the leadership of the Conservative Party. They're mirror images of each other. So it's unshakable. The far more important question is the Leach-O'Leary phenomenon. Both Kelly Leach and Kevin O'Leary believe that there is a deep discontent inside Canada, especially within the Conservative movement within Canada, that the status quo is broken, that all of the traditional accommodations that we have made over the decades are invalid and discredited. Yeah. That, in other words, Canada is broken in the same way that America is broken. and they are going to surf that anger, that sense of alienation and frustration to the leadership of the party and then to the premiership. I don't believe Canada is broken, and I believe they will fail, but that's what they're attempting.
Let me jump in here for a second, because I've been listening to practically every interview that Kevin O'Leary has given. He calls himself a feminist. He says he is pro-choice.
Which is hilarious.
Pro-LGBTQI. He said it in a way that suggests he's familiar with the acronym. Legalize marijuana, pro-assisted suicide, pro-immigration and diversity, and he's looking to get those 18 to 35-year-olds that he thinks are still staying at home because they feel they've been economically disadvantaged in this society. That's way different from what we're hearing from any other candidate. He's essentially, let me put this on the table, a red Tory.
He's
he's a libertarian, I would say.
There's one in there you miss. He's also pro-carbon tax. Which, you know...
he's anti-carbon tax.
He's anti-carbon tax, Marty. He's changed on that.
He was pro-carbon tax until he was... Okay.
Yeah,
right. He's a good politician already. There you go.
Yeah, no, the new word from O'Leary is just ignore everything I've said up until now. It was just television.
Yeah.
So that in that he resembles Trump, too. That list that you just read, Carol, is interesting and instructive, and you're right. He's not a carbon copy of Trump, and in some ways he's less menacing than Trump. But I don't think we should ignore the incredibly simplistic economic formula, the outdated economic formula that he brings to the table. He's essentially saying, get that oil going down south, let's, forget about regulation. He's essentially saying, slash corporate taxes. These are the old prescriptions from the Reagan era, which didn't work then and won't work now. It's so unfresh, and it's so, I think the other important point that Arlene Dickinson made was that there is in a lot of these highly successful business types a real lack of compassion or understanding for people whose lives haven't been as easy as theirs.
Okay. There's the issue of O'Leary's proficiency in French, and here's what he told CBC Radio's Jill Deacon earlier this week.
I used to be relatively proficient till I was 7 and I left Quebec because I grew up in Saint Adèle. But, people say I can't speak French. However, c'est pas vrai.
C'est pas vrai? Ça commence?
Mon français devient mieux chaque jour.
I'm working on it. Okay.
Well, okay. What do you make of that, Marty? I'm going to go to you because you can interpret that better than the rest of us, I think.
He'll be fine. I don't think the French thing is an issue. As I've said before, the only thing you got to do in Quebec is, when it comes to Quebec or French speakers anywhere in Canada, is to show that you're making an effort and that you're getting better at it. That covers up a lot of sin, grammatically and otherwise, when it comes to speaking French. So I don't think it'll be an issue for him.
Now, John and Susan, you've expressed different opinions in the past.
Well, to the best of my knowledge, he doesn't speak French, can't speak French, and won't speak French, and therefore, if he becomes leader of the Conservative Party, he will be able to single-handedly revive the sovereigntist movement. More important, though,
I don't think so.
is that Kevin O'Leary is a huckster. His views change from day to day. His allegiance to Canada is spotty at best. He doesn't even live here. He's Michael Ignatieff with a charismatic smile. He basically just wants to surf anger and alienation, whatever his views are, to become the leader of the Conservative Party and then of the country. And I don't think that, there is a huckster in the White House right now. It can be done. It can be achieved. I just don't think Canada is broken enough to make Kevin O'Leary Prime Minister.
John Geddes reminded us this week that he doesn't need Quebec. He said in 2011, there was a Conservative majority and only 5 seats in Quebec.
From a Prime Minister, though, who worked very hard to speak French.
Yeah, but I'm nervous about this. Unlike Marty, I live in Quebec too, Anglophone, but still, I live in Quebec too, and I'm nervous about reigniting the language wars. Not just Mr. O'Leary's kind of offhand treatment of the French language. Oh yeah, maybe I'll learn it. I'll learn it in time. But also, which by the way is not echoed by those poor, struggling the other 13 candidates who tried manfully. This week in that debate, seems like so long ago, to speak French, sometimes terribly, but nonetheless they tried, which indicates that it's still important to some people at least. The other thing that worried me was Justin Trudeau's offhand comment at one of his his People's Tour in Sherbrooke, when he was asked a question in English about mental health, he replied in French.
Yeah, you know what? In his case, it was a problem of speaking too much French. We're going to deal with that in just a second, Susan.